and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode, I'm joined by Teagasc specialist Catherine Keena to get an update on the new results-based environment agri pilot programme, also known as REAP. I first asked Catherine, what is REAP?
REAP, or the Results-Based Environment Agri Pilot, is a pilot project to test the results-based approach and prepare advisors, farmers and the department for new agri-environment schemes in the next Rural Development Programme in 2023.
And what farmers can apply for the new programme, Catherine?
Well, there's no guarantee of entry. It's a small pilot. Any farmer can apply except those who are in GLAS or were ever approved for GLAS, farmers who are involved in the European innovation projects, the EIPs, such as the Hen Harrier, the Pearl Mussel, and there's 21 other ones, smaller ones around the country, or if farmers are involved in organics on the 1st of January this year.
And who will get priority into the scheme then?
The department want a variety. They want kind of a geographic spread of farmers. So it's, as I said, it's a pilot, it's testing a system. So there is nothing you can do to help your access into the scheme. It'll be almost like a lotto, because whoever applies, assuming it will be oversubscribed, the department will want a representative sample of those to be involved in the scheme. So every county, farmers with every advisor, highly stocked farmers, lowly stocked farmers. It's really a representative sample of those who apply, Catherine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. And how do farmers go about applying for the new pilot programme?
Farmers must apply through Department of Agriculture approved REAP advisor. So they can be, whoever you're dealing with, whatever advisor you're dealing with. If you're dealing with Teagasc, ring the local Teagasc office or your local private consultant, whoever you're working with for other advice.
And you mentioned there that just because you apply doesn't mean you will be accepted. So when will farmers know if they're accepted into the new programme?
Hopefully in a few weeks, because then the advisors must be trained at the beginning of June to understand exactly what is involved in the programme. So within a few weeks, I would expect farmers will know.
And what do farmers have to do in the programme?
Okay, so they don't have to do anything in the programme. The whole idea of a results-based programme is you get valued for what you have and your payments are based on the results rather than what you do. So that's the key change here that we're all getting used to, although it has been used since the Burren and the Hen Harrier and the Pearl Mussel projects. So some advisors and farmers are very familiar. Well, those farmers won't be involved in the scheme, but those advisors would be familiar. But to the rest of farmers, it is a very new concept. So for example, there are two, if the farmer is accepted into the programme, the associated advisor will visit in June, July, and will score the fields that are selected. So the fields that can be scored, we didn't mention there that tillage fields cannot be scored, or peatland with heather cannot be scored. Now farmers with those can still go in if they have grass fields. So only grass fields are eligible for scoring, and only grass fields that are on your BPS in 2020. So in June, July, the advisor will go to the farm and will score the grass fields up to 10 hectares, a minimum of 2 hectares and a maximum of 10 hectares. The farmer will select the fields that he thinks will score best. The advisor then will decide decide which scorecard to use, and there are 2 scorecards. So one is on low input grassland, which is very like low input permanent pasture that we've had previously in schemes. And the second one is multi-species swards, which is a very new concept of sowing legumes with the ryegrass when you're reseeding intensive land. So there's 2 very different categories there. The advisor can use the 2 scorecards on the one farm, but obviously not on the one field.
And what is classified as a low input grassland?
Low input grassland is one that has flowering species naturally there. So, you know, the number of flowering species, the less ryegrass, the better it will score. So anything can be scored, but depending on the number of species of, you know, the natural wildflowers that are in those old grasslands, the advisor will be scoring on the flowering plants. But obviously, if there's flowering plants there, the old grasses are very definitely going to be there rather than ryegrass. A small amount of ryegrass can be still there, but in general, it's a sward, Catherine, that has, you know, never or for a long time not been reseeded, not received much fertilizer. But anything can be scored, but the ones who are likely to score well will be those which have not been reseeded and have received very little, if any, fertilizer.
And is there a limit to the fertilizer that can be applied into this low input grassland?
No, there's no rules in this scheme, because you can do what you like and you will be based on the result. Your payment will be based on the result. So obviously, if you want to score well on low input grassland, you do not put on much fertilizer, because fertilizer does not suit the species, the wildflower species that we're talking about. And, you know, then associated grazing would be kind of extensive grazing if the fertilizer isn't put on. If it's not ryegrass, it will be farmed extensively by naturally, if you know what I mean. But there are no rules, Catherine.
That's great. And you mentioned there the multi-species swards. What are multi-species swards?
Okay, they're a new-ish idea, kind of been tried out and only been tested and researched, I suppose, in practice at the moment. So this is where you have intensive ryegrass land, and instead of reseeding with ryegrass or with clover, which we'll be more familiar with, but it's including, in addition to the clover, herbs such as lucerne, chicory, yarrow, San Juan. So it's basically a herbal ley, Catherine.
And when has this to be sown by then to participate in the scheme?
Well, a farmer may have it already, or if they apply now and if they're accepted into the scheme, they may decide to sow it in this year or next year. Don't forget, it's a 2-year scheme. Anybody who is accepted into REAP will be in it for 2021 and 2022. So in 2021, I think it has to be sown by mid-August if you want to get paid on it for this year. So that all those conversations will happen with the advisor if you're accepted into the scheme before the advisor visits. So, you know, as soon as you're accepted into the scheme, then you need to have a good talk with the advisor as to if there's anything you can do before the advisor comes out. And one example there would be the sowing the multi-species swards. The other example, Catherine, would be fencing off the margins. There's additional scores if you have a grassy margin, if your wire fence is pulled out or a new wire fence is put up 1, 2 or 3 meters from a boundary. There is additional scores there. You don't have to do it, but if you have a fence 3 meters out from your boundary, you will get a lot higher score than if you have no fence at your fence at the boundary.
And in relation to the additional actions that farmers can pick up to maximise payments, will this come in under this additional action?
No, the capital actions then are different. So the capital actions are if you choose to plant trees or hedges. And because there'll be only one planting season remaining in this 2-year programme, there'll be one chance to plant trees or hedges, which will potentially add €1,200 to your payment in one of the years. Whenever the payment comes through. So you would be identifying these this summer and planting them this autumn and probably be paid that additional 1,200 on top of the score-based payment. So trees and hedging is the capital action that we'll be more familiar with. If you do it, you get paid. you don't have to do it.
What's the maximum payment a farmer can receive?
The maximum payment, if a farmer scored, the highest score, the payment in the scheme, if a farmer scores 10 out of 10 on the low input grassland, there's a higher payment for that. And there's an additional option there to late mown meadows, to hold your meadows, not to cut them until after July. Like the traditional, kind of similar to the traditional hay meadow we would have been used to. The maximum payment for the field there would be 4,500. So again, adding to the other two, the payments, 6,900 in 1 year and then 5,700 in another year when you're not getting paid for the hedges and trees. So the absolute maximum in the scheme is 6,900. But average payments will be significantly lower than these. The multi-species swards is already a lesser payment than the low input grassland, because the multi-species, you will get more production out of that than you will out of the low input grassland. So average payments will be absolutely much less than that, but it's still well worth looking at, even to see. There'll be no negative payments, if you know what I mean, Catherine. There's nothing to lose by going in. So any money will be a bonus, rather than expecting, big money. That's the way I would put it.
And how will the REAP be evaluated, or will there be inspections?
Yes, so when the advisor visits in June, July, the department inspectors, similar to the projects, the EIPs that we're familiar with, the project team, and in this case the department, follow on a number of them to inspect, to do this using the same scorecard to check. And as I said, the scorecard is fairly black and white, but obviously has to be checked pretty soon after the advisor has been there. So that will be carried out in August. So this is the whole rush for this scheme, to get it through so that the farmers then can be paid by the end of the year. But also we can only score these, both the advisor and the department can only score these when the flowers are out. So again, that's another what we're testing out, I suppose, in this pilot.
That's great, Catherine. And finally, what is the deadline the farmers have to apply for the new pilot by?
Okay, the online application to be put in by the advisor must go in before the 10th of May. It's a simple enough application. The farmers are familiar with their advisors texting out to give them access to act on their behalf, texting out and the farmer replying to the text DAFMY. As soon as that, there's about 10 questions the advisor has to fill in for the farmer. Literally, are you in the schemes? Are you in the GLOS, organics, EIPs? What's your enterprise? Have you been involved in results-based? Nothing too onerous. It's just the farmer needs to be there when the advisor is actually answering those questions. But literally a short job once they're both there together and the application is submitted online. The application process is not complicated, but just needs to be done before Monday the 10th.
So if a farmer is interested in applying, they need to contact their advisor as soon as possible.
Exactly, Catherine, immediately. The DAFM text system only works where it's straightforward, single herd number. If there's partnerships, companies, etc., they are more complicated and need a paper authorization.
That's great, Catherine. Thanks very much. Your great insight into the new results-based environment agri pilot programme.
Thank you, Catherine.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Catherine for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan and thanks for listening.